Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on Marshstream, your public performance broadcast platform. My name is Brianna Caver, assistant producer for Marshstream, and we are back again tonight for Solo Arts Heal. Quickly, before we start, as many of you know, our theater doors still remain closed and we are unable to invite folks in for performances. So these free streaming performances are brought to you by patrons just like yourself, all who donate to our tip jar. The link is posted in the chat and is also available on our website at themarsh.org. Remember, all donations are tax deductible and 100% matched. We need you now more than ever so we can continue to bring these free streaming performances to our community. If you're watching us live on YouTube, welcome and thank you for joining us. Please make sure you subscribe to be notified when we go live and watch the hours of free performances, interviews, and events we have archived all right there on our channel. Now let's welcome your host for Solo Arts Heal, Kristen Scheel.
And welcome to Solo Arts Heal. I'm Kristen Scheel for The Marsh. Solo Arts Heal presents empowering performances about healing and resilience. Through hosted interviews, talkbacks, and audience Q&A, the Solo Arts Heal program provides transformative experiences, education, community outreach, and advocacy through stories that celebrate the healing power of the arts. Our guest tonight, Gabrielle Lennon, joins us from Florida. She's worked for more than 25 years as a professional actress on stage and in film, as a published writer in multiple genres, and as a teaching artist. She attended summer drama programs at Carnegie Mellon and Yale Universities. She graduated from Northwestern University with a degree in performance studies and an honors program in creative writing for the media. Her work focused on analysis, interpretation, and performance of prose, poetry, and drama, and on creative writing. Lennon's books are Touch Me Real and Other Stories, and After Midnight, a book of poetry. Gabrielle Lennon's Touch Me Real is an open-hearted story about falling in love and falling apart. It's about deep friendship touched by the frightening, severe mental illness of a partner. Carrie and Mike are two young people who are growing closer even after Mike's schizophrenia begins to emerge. The play is based on events in Gabrielle's own life. The play was made possible through a grant from the State Individual Artist Grants in conjunction with the National Endowment for the Arts. Technical assistance for the Zoom production of Touch Me Real was provided by Rick Knowlton and director Elizabeth Browning. Please welcome Gabrielle Lennon to Solo Arts Heal. We're so glad you could join us, and I'm excited to share this play. I know it's going to resonate with anyone who has loved or cared for a loved one who is broken in the same way. I know you've been adapting the story over decades, and it first appeared as a novella in a collection of the same name. Before we get to your clip, I was wondering if you could take a minute to explain how this story has evolved to the Zoom adaptation.
Sure. Well, it originally, as you said, it was a novella that I wrote. And I think I wrote it, oh gosh, like 30 years ago. As a way to process or to help process. I don't think I've completely processed even now what happened, but to really start processing what happened and also to communicate some things about it that I wanted to communicate. And so it was a novella, and as you said, it's in my short story collection, Touch Me Real. And then a few years later, I moved to New York and I decided I wanted to adapt it into a solo show. And so I started working on it. And then I was living in Ecuador when I finished the first version of it. So I did it in Ecuador. I had 3 different runs in Ecuador of this first version of it. And at the time, it was just the character Carrie talking for the most part, with one exception of the psychotic break. And it was about an hour and a half long at the time. Then I went through many years of not touching it, being actually too afraid to do it in the States for some reason. And finally, I applied to a solo show festival with it, and I applied really close to the deadline. So their festival was already filled up for that year. So they said they wanted me to do a preview that year, and the following year they wanted me to do the full show. So that was in 2018, and I completely rewrote it. And they were wonderful. That was the Sarah Solo Festival, and they were wonderful, guiding me, giving me, like, oh, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? Kind of thing for rewriting it. And I totally rewrote it. And I think it was even better than the Ecuador version. And then I ended up getting this really pretty big grant, $25,000 from the Florida Department of State, to act in the show that I had written. And I'd gone through rehearsals, and I had done one live performance, and the pandemic hit and everything was canceled. And so I was just like, oh, what am I going to do? I have to fulfill my grant. And so I was like, oh, well, I could do it on Zoom. And then my husband's like, well, why don't you make a video of it and do the video on Zoom? That way you'll have something at the end of it. And I'll make curtains and make our living room into a navy blue box theater. And I can be the videographer. He's an amazing videographer. So this is a good offer for me, And then I decided to hire a new director, especially for the video, because I had a director for the play version for the grant, but this was a different thing because it was video and everything. So I hired Elizabeth Browning, and she was amazing. She is amazing, and we have never met in person. She directed all via Zoom, and she suggested, and we decided, okay, I'm going to rewrite it again. And this time I'm going to bring in the psychiatrist and Mike as characters and play all of them. So I rewrote the whole thing again for the video, and eventually we filmed it.
Well, I'm very excited. I think we should move towards to the clip, but I want you to set up the whole arc of the story so that the clip can be placed within that, and just kind of take us through the play as fill in the gaps for the audience that will be not seeing the whole thing tonight.
Well, there are two bookends. The first and the last scenes are me, my age now, which is 55, talking and saying, oh, this happened. I like talking to a friend, and then it's sort of like bookends to put us in the present time. And then the play within the play begins where, well, how does it begin? It's like, it shows Carrie, the main character, who is me, she's waiting for Mike to come visit her at her new apartment. And she starts, what, Kristen?
Falling in love.
Yeah, she's totally in love. And she starts remembering, and she's like, oh my gosh, and she's telling she's telling all about their friendship up to the point where she's waiting for him in the apartment, and it talks about like how they met and all, because they're totally emotionally intimate, and they have a quirky, wonderful, fun, deeply emotionally intimate relationship where they laugh together, and and there are scenes where they're doing all of this stuff and having all their adventures. And then she's like, and then we're back in the middle of the play. We're back. She's waiting, and he arrives, and from that point on in the play, before we get to the next bookend, it's the visit. And essentially, she has shoved under the rug her feelings, her romantic and sexual feelings for him for all these years, because she just was too afraid of them. And she's decided she can't shove them under the rug anymore. She's going to tell him that she's not going to say she's in love with him, even though she is. She's going to say she's attracted to him because it's less vulnerable. And the play is a lot about vulnerability and true intimacy and everything. And they briefly get together because he has been in love with her this whole time. And they briefly get together, and he confides that when they had been the 6 months that they hadn't seen each other between college graduation and them seeing each other now, because she was living at a yoga ashram and he was backpacking around the world, and they didn't, so they were, and then they moved to separate cities. So in that time period, he confides that he had attempted suicide. And he also confides that they put him on all this medication that he doesn't need, which last week when she invited him here, he went off of all of it because it's, you know, it has all these awful side effects. And the medication has been leaving his system all week. And eventually he ends up having a full-blown psychotic episode. And she realizes that, she brings him to a psychiatrist, and she finds in the yellow pages, and who tells her that he has sudden onset paranoid schizophrenia, that is what is going on with him. And she realizes that she cannot have what they would have had if he hadn't gotten sick. And then we get to the bookend again where she's a grown woman again. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. So this part that we're going to see is a visit.
Yeah, actually, you're going to see little snippets from the visit. So yes.
Great.
Like 4 different little snippets from 5 different little snippets from the visit. Yeah.
Great. Well, let's get started. Let's take a look.
A few weeks later, we're barefoot, walking and talking by the lake, holding hands, standing in the sand under the stars. We do this every night as sort of a prelude to rehearsing for acting class. Watching the water, beautiful, deep, mysterious, rolling, dark. It seems like something ominous is lurking under the surface by the rocks. I know Michael feels it too. So frightening to look at that water. So I go running and skipping on the beach. Michael's crying a little. He says all these emotions are coming up for him now that he's stopped wearing his contact lenses, which he says are a block to feeling. I'm amazed that he's so perceptive, so sensitive. He's also asking me if I've felt any different lately. I haven't, because he thinks his stepsister is dabbling in black magic, and he's afraid she put a spell on the sock I left at his house when I was visiting over winter vacation. Mike, you are so wacky. We go back to my dorm. Mike's waiting outside the room till I change. I have to wear pajamas for our scene, so I'm wearing my nicest nightgown this time. Mike comes in for the rehearsal, but as usual, we start talking. Carrie, what's the most embarrassing thing that's ever happened to you? I don't know. What's yours? I asked you first. Okay. No. Well, okay. I was visiting this yoga ashram for a weekend workshop. The place is completely celibate. Like, you can't even go on a date, much less masturbate or have sex. The women there are sisters, the men brothers. You get the idea. I was sleeping naked. You were sleeping naked? In my own cubicle. In the sisters' dorm. There were like 48 women in bunks and cubicles in this giant room, but I had my own little cubicle. And it's more comfortable to be naked than it is to have clothes on, right? Yeah. More comfortable. So, I was alone in my cubicle. Ugh. Cubicle. I was naked because it's just more comfortable. Anyway, I woke up because I had to pee. So I put my nightgown on and went down the hall to the bathroom. So I peed, and since the library was right there, I figured I'd pop my head in and see if anyone from the workshop was there, even though I was still half asleep. Uh-oh. So I went in, and there were all these brothers, these men who lived there who'd been celibate God knows how long. And I noticed they were all staring at me, dumbfounded, but not at my face, which often happens in life, but not at the ashram. What was up? Well, I looked down at my nightgown and saw that I'd accidentally put my arm through the head hole with my head. It only had straps, so the holes were kind of big. And sticking out of the armhole was my entire left breast. Oh my God. So, that's it! Mount Everest! Then for some reason we start talking about sex, which lately has been our favorite topic. Carrie, it's great to see you. Me too. I mean, it's great to see you too. Okay. Are you starving? Do you want to eat? Sure, yeah. Great. Let's go into the kitchen then. I made some special things earlier today. Ooh, special things. What? Vegetarian spinach lasagna with an appetizer of mixed nuts and bubbly wild cherry juice as our champagne. Cherry juice? Yeah, I stopped drinking. Do you know what storybook land is like? It's when everything is there, but someone above you is writing a story about you, and you are simply in it. And everything is false, but it's also very secure. The story was Pinocchio, and I had marionette strings like the Krishna religion in India. And for the life of me, I wanted to be free of those marionette strings so the tones would resolve in my mind. I even called up Fargo, North Dakota tonight, and they said, there is no loam. That the way they said it was, there is no loam in your universe. The old person was, maybe you can bring him back and have him as your baby. He'd love to be your baby. He brought Cairo oranges over the border into Israel, and one of each kind of orange. The earth in Cairo cried out that the earth is mentally ill. He was scared of that because he saw in a dream in the womb, and we all had to walk in different directions and never marry one another. Raining, draining, staining, staining, waning, hating, raining, ray, 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 rape, You're so sexy! Oh! You raped me! You're lewd, Carrie, and so sexual. You were so sexual, Carrie, when you attacked me on the rug. Hey, you! You're sexy! Do you want to have sex? You seduced me, Carrie Welton. Oh, God. Something in his face changes. Again. Mike? What's wrong? Something's really wrong, isn't it? It's okay. I'll be okay. Don't worry. Something's wrong, Mike. What's wrong? He relaxes out of it and into me. I feel his sweatshirt against my face. His head is resting on mine. I hug him so tightly, and I feel him crying. Oh, God. I've never seen someone psychotic before. But oh, God. I know. He's psychotic. Listen. I'm just gonna make a call. Stay here, okay? I touch my lips to his forehead, and I feel him shaking. Two hours and some convincing later, Michael's sitting in the rocking chair in the psychiatrist's office I found in the yellow pages. I feel embarrassed that this is my best friend. Shame that I'm embarrassed. My heart is pounding a hole through the wall in my chest. The doctor asks me to step outside for a minute. Michael gave me permission to talk to you. He's been hospitalized 3 times in the past 5 months. He's on the verge of hospitalization again for sudden onset paranoid schizophrenia. What? It happens to some young men suddenly, between the ages of 18 and 26. What? He told me memories kept coming up for him of his brother beating him till he bled while his father watched laughing, and of some strange sexual thing his father used to do to him when he was 5, which is horrible, but would not necessarily cause schizophrenia. But then he told me about lying naked in a field after church on the day of psychotic tones, and about the police taking him to a place with no mirrors, that he almost burned the house down by putting a Bible on the stove, but he saved it by dancing barefoot in the street in the freezing rain. But there's never been anything like this in him. All these years I've known him. Carrie, this is a classic example of how some people with schizophrenia behave when they're not on their medicine or when medication doesn't work. When medication doesn't work? I'm hoping he won't hurt himself or someone else. He has to go home where his doctors are today. He would never hurt anyone. He's the gentlest person I know. He would never hurt anyone, but the disease is taking over his brain. With this illness and in this condition, he could hurt you or himself. Hurt himself. You mean commit suicide? Yes. I'm sorry. I'll go get Michael. I don't understand. The disease is taking over his brain? He's leaving his brain? And I don't know where he's going. How can a disease take over someone's brain? I want him in his brain. I want him in his body. After a dose of medication, I'm back at the apartment. I look at Michael and smooth back his hair. I feel like his mother, wanting to make everything all better. I wonder if he would have gotten sick if he hadn't gone to Egypt, where the foundation set long ago, like a shattered windshield that hasn't broken yet. It's completely cracked, but still intact. And you tap it, and it all comes tumbling down. Waiting for the medication to take full effect. Shouldn't be long. His stepsister took the train down to make sure he gets home okay. She's waiting in his car. He looks confused, forlorn, like a small child. I have to leave? Yeah. I'm trying to say it gently, but I want to scream, "Stop acting this way." That's the last thing he needs, but I don't know what to do. Keep the hysteria at bay? Make him think it's going to be all right, so maybe it will be? So he gets home okay? So he doesn't kill himself? My heart hurts. You have to go. I feel his arms around me and wonder if I'll ever see him again. He leaves. I hear the gravel crunching under his car as he pulls out and drives away. Numb, expecting him to somehow still be here. This apartment feels like a vacuum. So silent. Silence like in Van Gogh's Starry Night. Rushing, swirling, roaring, reverberating, crazy currents everywhere. I want to pound the walls and scream, scream, scream. Where the fuck? Where the fuck is he? Please let this be a joke. I'll forgive you, Mike. I'll do anything. But I am standing here containing it. I am not going to shatter. Silence is surging all around me.
You've captured the openness of Carrie's feelings of first love, and then we are with her when she feels this terrifying fall. And I think the way that you've chosen to go back and forth between the characters of Carrie and Mike emphasizes the overlap between his trauma and yours of witnessing it. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the process of performing and writing this play has helped you process the end of this, the relationship that inspired the story.
Well, actually, I think I started writing it to help me process it. I don't know if it's actually helped me process it. I think every time I go into it, it reawakens everything, to be honest. And so it's really hard actually to act it, because I go back there every time I act it. And because I'm like reliving even, and because I've done the acting homework, even though a lot of the events in the play are made up, the emotional truth of those events is true. And so going back to all that, yeah, it's really hard actually. I know that when I was writing it, I worked a lot with actual, working like, when I first was writing it, the novella, it was, I guess, the early 90s and the late 80s when I was writing it. So there were tape recorders then. I would abreact through sense memory actual experiences, and then I would tape record. I would just like talk them like as if it were happening right then, because it was in my body, because I had gone back through sense memory, and and then to get like authentic dialogue and like what was really going on at the lowest common denominator for me at those times, so that I could tell the emotional truth in the piece. Yeah.
What were the different decisions that you made to deviate from your story with the story that you share in the play?
Well, there are a lot of differences in the real story. And again, it's all emotionally the same. Like, for example, in the play, Carrie finds a psychiatrist in the Yellow Pages because in the play, he's visiting her at her own apartment. In reality, my friend, I had just finished living at the yoga ashram for 6 months. And before I got my own apartment, I was camping out on in my father's den for 6 months. And that's where I was living when this happened. And my stepmother, their son, and my father had gone on a trip, and I invited my friend over to visit me. So it actually happened in my father's house. And my father, he was a psychiatrist. And well, when his medication wore off and he got psychotic and everything, I couldn't let him go home. So everyone got back from the trip and he was still there. And my father gave him a free session, and that's when he was diagnosed. And my father told me, what was going on and everything. So that's very different. And I guess I just thought, for a play that's going to be like an hour to an hour and a half long, I think the play runs about like an hour and 20 minutes now. It would be I thought it would just be too extraneous, and kind of take focus away from what I wanted the focus to be, to like have, and so my father is getting home now, and my stepmother's there, and my infant half brother's there. It just was like, that would not be. So I decided to make it that.
In the true story of your life, did your father introduce the concept of schizophrenia to you? When did these warning signs that you were witnessing, that you share in the play very beautifully, I think, the way that you bring these kinds of parts of his personality in as if they are character traits, which you then become aware are symptoms. Did your father's kind of expertise in the field inform that reaction that you had?
No, when my father told me that he had schizophrenia, I was just in shock, because there was, as far as I was concerned in those moments, there had never been anything like this in him. It was totally like sudden onset with no warning, no signs, nothing. And my father, he just offered me like sympathy. I mean, I was like scream crying at the kitchen table. And it was just so painful. And he was just, saying like, I know, it's your dear friend and everything. And it was only really much later in retrospect that I thought, wow, I wonder if that thing at the lake, because that really did happen, where he in the clip that you guys saw, that he said, you know, he was worried that his stepsister was dabbling in black magic, and that she'd maybe put a spell on the sock I left at his house when I was visiting over a recent vacation. And then, and only years later in retrospect was like, I wonder if that was like the very beginnings of it all, because I just thought at the time, oh my God, he's so creative. He's brilliant, because he was incredibly creative and he was brilliant. And so, yeah, I had no idea, but I do know that one of my goals with the show is, you know, I did sprinkle those things in because I want people to see those potential signs, because the earlier the diagnosis, the better the prognosis in this disease. And if people can recognize, you know, if audience members can recognize if it's happening, if it's beginning to happen to someone, they can get that person help. And if they can prevent the first psychotic break from happening, the prognosis is so much better. And if they can prevent the second psychotic break from happening, the prognosis is so much better. And I think with every break, the prognosis gets worse and worse.
Right. When I was reading up on it, I learned something I didn't know before, that a psychotic break is like an earthquake, like it builds up the tension over time. It's not a sudden event out of nowhere. And so there are things that you can look for. Also, in reading up, I found lots of advice about, you know, use your gut, or go with your gut or your intuition. And I think that, you know, as you've described this psychotic break within an intimate relationship, you were aware of the strangeness of this didn't match with the person you knew, and you were seeing a different reality than that person. And sometimes it's hard to communicate that to other people, to help diagnose somebody who's going through this. You need some kind of mediary. And in your experience with the play, or in Carrie's situation or in your situation, could you speak to what interventions that you made that you felt good about, that you felt were helpful to
Michael?
Michael?
To my friend, you mean? I don't think I don't think any interventions I'd made were helpful, honestly. He needed competent help, and competent help is hard to find. It's next to impossible to find a really good therapist, I think. It really is. There's so few actually competent, good therapists. I don't know. I mean, in my experience anyway. And I mean, all I could offer him was my love, my friendship, my support. You know, I mean, I talked to him on the phone for endless hours. And that, you know, that's like really important, to know that someone like loves you unconditionally, someone loves you even if you're sick and everything. But in terms of anything that made his illness go away, I couldn't do anything to make his illness go away. Yeah. And medication didn't really work very well for him. So, yeah.
Now, when you have shared this story in audiences, and what has been the response from people?
It's been really a really nourishing response, because people cry. A lot of people cry after the show, during the show, after the show, because they're having their own catharsis, their own healing catharsis, because the essence of the show, I mean, on the surface and somewhat deeply, it's about what it's about, you know, but the lowest common denominator of what it's about is, it's like when you lose someone you love, and everyone has lost someone they love. And so everyone can have a healing catharsis around losing someone they love. And at the same time, there's live talk back after each show, where people can talk about whatever they want to talk about, ask me any questions they want. And it's been unbelievable in that it seems like pretty much everybody has someone they love who has, you know, some severe mental illness, and everyone desperately needs to talk about it. And it's funny because the first night, my director was there, and she had a lot of her friends come, and every single person had somebody that had a severe mental illness that they loved, and they all felt this desperate need to talk about it after the show because of the emotions that got stirred up from the show. And my director was talking to me afterwards, and she's like, God, wasn't that a coincidence? And then she's just paused and she said, you know what? I don't think that was a coincidence. She said, I think that severe mental illness today is like alcoholism was before AA came into being, in that everyone either had it, loved someone who had it, or both. The stigma was huge. There was absolutely nowhere to talk about it, and everybody desperately needed to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And here we are, you know, so people end up talking about it a lot in the talkbacks most of the time, and it's been really nourishing. I feel like ideally, you know, like when the pandemic's over and the show goes live, ideally there would be talkbacks after every show, because I think people need that. And ideally, maybe even, I don't know about what I'm about to say, but maybe if there were a competent therapist who could be present at the talkbacks too, just so that people, not even maybe participating in the talkback, but just so that afterwards, if someone really needed to, they could go to the therapist and just get resources and stuff.
Right. Your story is about this intimate experience, which I think is very common, and that's what you're talking about. And you're drawing people to the show who want that connection and want to share that in that way. And there isn't a group. And I don't know what it's like where you live in Florida, but here in San Francisco, we witness people often on the street who are suffering, unmedicated, and psychotic. And touch is the furthest thing from our minds. And especially in COVID times, when social distancing is being practiced by most, this is, you feel, how do you touch these people who are suffering? It's a pandemic, mental illness, and here it is very visible and rampant.
Yeah, and I know that a lot of what the show is about is intimacy at all levels, and how scary it is, and how vital it is, and, you know, touch me real, you know, at all levels. And also about, you know, seeing the person under the illness, and at the same time seeing the illness clearly, because that really exists too, and it's pretty important in a relationship. So, yeah.
I did want to ask you about the Touch Me Real. When did you titled your novella this? And where did you come up with it?
During one of my friend's psychotic episodes. In the show, I pieced together a bunch of different psychotic episodes, you know, taking bits and pieces and into one. But in reality, there were many psychotic episodes that I witnessed on the telephone and in person and everything. And in one of them, he said, Hector Loam, that's my real name. If you rearrange the letters, they spell Touch Me Real. And it's true. That is an accurate statement.
Wow.
That if you rearrange the letters, they do spell Touch Me Real. So, and I thought that Touch Me Real really is the essence of this show, because of, you know, the themes of vulnerability and intimacy and really knowing someone deeply.
Mm-hmm. We have a question from, I don't know why I'm not quite seeing it, from John. Let's see. How difficult was it to film this without an audience after having planned and started to perform live? About your adaptation.
Yeah, it was not difficult without an audience, because I had my director and I had my husband, who is the videographer and technical person for every aspect of technical stuff. And so, I had my acting tools, so I could just use my acting tools to go where I needed to go and do what I needed to do. So it actually, it was really wonderful to do the video. Actually, I loved doing the video. I love performing it live too. It's a different experience for sure. Both are different experiences.
We have a comment from Gail as well. Thanks for sharing these powerful performance excerpts. There are several types of schizophrenia, and I was surprised to learn that about 1 in 100 people are affected. But although schizophrenia tends to run in families, no single gene is thought to be responsible. Rather, the environment plays a role. Is stress a big trigger? What do you know about it?
That's a good question. Well, yeah, I know that the jury's been out on like nature and nurture and how much of each and stuff. I know with my friend, I don't know specifically if anyone else, I don't know of anyone else in his family who had it, but that's, I don't know about his grandparents or anything like that. I know that he had a lot of abuse in his childhood that he confided in me way before he got sick, years before he got sick. And I'm sure that had something to do with it. And at the same time, I know that typical onset for males is between two specific ages, and typical onset for females is between two slightly different specific ages. So I know that there must be something that actually happens in the brain, and whether something, and if it were only if it were only nurture, then that something could happen anytime. Like whenever the tipping point happened, it would happen. And there wouldn't be like a specific age range that most people have onset. So it's got to be some kind of combination of brain chemistry and upbringing. Yeah.
So I thought I would just share a few things that I've learned that were surprising to me. One is how common schizophrenia is in our population, that it's about 1%. And I think in this year where we're so deluged with statistics about 1% and what that means and how many that is, it's hard to visualize, and it seems unreliable. But that 1.5 million will be diagnosed in the year is incredible in the United States. Also that 50% do not receive any treatment of any kind. That schizophrenics are not more aggressive or violent than the general population. The diagnosis is so tricky, as we alluded to earlier, and Hollywood and the media have portrayed a certain kind of story, which has influenced kind of the popular culture idea of schizophrenics. And so one thing I really appreciate about this show is showing this whole arc of Michael in relationship to Carrie, because we fall for him with you, and then we don't want to lose him either. Which is, it's not your typical encounter with schizophrenia on the street, but you've given us a really intimate and glimpse of a more meaningful and human interaction.
Yeah, I think that schizophrenia, it just like any disease, it has certain characteristics of the disease, and there are different types of schizophrenia, and each type has different characteristics. But just like cancer, people of all different personalities get cancer. Cancer has certain characteristics. So certain things happen when you have cancers, and there are different types of cancer too, just like there are different types of schizophrenia. But people's personalities are so varied. Everyone's an individual. Same thing with, it's a brain disease, schizophrenia.
Right. There's a comment from Terry Lowe in the chat. Would you be willing to share that a number of things can cause people to become psychotic, that psychotic episodes are not always caused by schizophrenia, and some causes of psychosis are much easier to treat or even cure than schizophrenia? People sometimes think psychosis and schizophrenia are the same thing, which makes psychosis that much scarier. And that is a great point. And one of the other things that I was reading about was the difficulty in diagnosing schizophrenia, and that it has to be a certain number of symptoms in a category and certain severity of symptoms in a category. So yes, absolutely. And delusional thinking, I learned some interesting things about delusional thinking, that there's bizarre and non-bizarre delusional thinking, and all of these things are just interesting to know about, and very difficult for any lay person to say much about right here. But I would like to bring up that one thing that I looked up was resources. You have on your webpage some resources. Would you share some of those with us, and what we can follow?
Sure. And there are a ton. I compiled this massive list of free resources. Everything that is on my website is free of charge. And you can just go to my website and see it. It's GabrielleLennon.com. Lennon spelled like John Lennon, but no relation. And the list of resources, it's for just any and every emotional illness, mental illness, someone who loves someone who has this particular emotional illness, any particular, so it's like, there are 12-step programs on there, and anything else that I could find that was free for any malady under the sun, and someone who loves anyone with any malady under the sun. And at my website, there's a little thing on the top. It says contact, and you can contact me through it. And if you have any other free resources that I should add to my list, definitely feel free to, let me know and everything.
I found that there are additional resources to the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill.
Yeah.
You probably have listed that as well. One of the things I was particularly interested in, because of the focus of your show, was how do you respond when someone is having a psychotic episode? And there comes a decision of whether you call or not. And that is a very, very difficult decision. But they did list a few things which I thought I would share that seem like useful things to keep in mind when someone is not functioning on the same sphere, but may not be dangerous to themselves or others. So some of the things that they noted on that site was, is your loved one or this person threatening harm to themselves or someone else? Have they ever attempted suicide before? Are they unable to feed or dress themselves? And are they living on the streets? And there are these occasions where you should call 911 and give that responsibility over to people who can do that kind of help. We also have a note from Jackson in the chat: free peer-led support groups for depression and bipolar, dbsa.org, Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah. Before we go, we're wrapping up here at the end of the hour. I want to hear, I know that you're also a poet and that you have some other projects in the works. So I'd love if you would take some time to tell us about your next work. What are you doing now?
Oh, I'm trying to decide what to do now. I am trying to get funded to write my next solo show. And it's about something completely different. Yeah, and I don't know if I should say what it's about or not.
You don't have to.
But only for safety reasons, honestly. But because Yeah, although I think with this crowd it would be fine, but then it'll be on the internet. But it's about a very serious issue that I hope that with the show that I want to write, I hope it will save lives. I hope it will save lives, and that is one of the big contenders for my next project. Yeah.
Are you preferring this medium, the performance, right now for sharing these messages?
You know, I love all mediums that I've tried so far. I think that if I had to pick one I love writing solo shows because I love acting in them as well. But I love writing poetry and I love writing prose, and any of the creative mediums I really love. And I'm writing an article that's not any of those, but hoping to, again, save lives. So therefore, ... Yeah.
That's great. Are there any other acknowledgements you'd like to give, or any for the performance that you have, or any place that we can see the full performance?
Sure. People can get tickets to the full performance via my website, GabrielleLennon.com. And I'm going to definitely be doing about 12 performances through August. 12 performances a month, 12 performances a month through August. Usually like 2 weekends I do performances, and then it's like a Friday, a Saturday, and a Sunday, and I do 2 each day so that Eastern time and Pacific time people can all, be comfortable. And so that's that. What was it? Like, what else did you ask me besides tickets?
Oh, just
acknowledgements. Yeah. Well, I just want to thank the Florida Department of State for giving me the grant that made this video possible, first of all, and equally my total dream team with the video, which was my husband, Rick Knowlton, and my director, Elizabeth Browning. They really were like a dream team. I had the best artistic experience of my life to date with them. It was such an amazing experience, and they are both just deep, complete artists, which makes me happy to work with people like that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining Solo Arts Heal today. It's been a pleasure to meet you and to share your work. Please, if you would share this video, it will be in the archive in YouTube at some point tomorrow, and we hope to see you again. And good luck with your new secret project.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Join us next week on Solo Arts Heal, when we will host Melinda Buckley with her play Mother and Me. Mother and Me is the story of a larger-than-life Hungarian Mama Rose, who's slowly waltzing into dementia as her Broadway baby, Melinda, shimmies into middle age. It's an outrageous one-woman show about stepping up and into your own light. And I'd like to thank our producers this evening, Brian Williamson and Brianna Caver, and for all of you for joining us on Solo Arts Heal. Have a great week.